I thought, Mimi, that we would start with the duet from Emeralds.
Good.
And of course, there's a lot of walking in it. It begins with walking. And I was wondering whether Balanchine had worked with you and Francisco Mancion on walking, whether there was a special way that he wanted you to do it.
The one thing that he did say to me was to think of what it would feel like to walk on a tightrope. And that made it clear how the walk would evolve from that statement. In that one toe would be placed directly in front of the other, and it would create a very distinct linear pattern as we were walking.
I think that also explains why your walking has a certain dramatic tension to it, too. It does, because it's not easy.
It's not easy to keep that pattern going from beginning to end. No.
And also, you know, the idea of walking on a tightrope means that you can fall off. So it's, you know, you have to be very careful, very cautious, and sort of deliberate.
It's cautious and deliberate and delicate at the same time. Just the placement of the foot on the floor is important. The taking off of the second foot before you place it forward is important. All those things.
Like how? And what? I mean,
with your hands, I was showing Sarah never having the two toes on the floor at the same moment, but propelling from the back foot.
I see.
To the forward motion.
Like a cat, really, in a way.
Yeah.
In a little bit, yeah. One thing I noticed about, I remember from your walk, is that just before, there was always a slight little space between your foot and the floor before you placed it. You didn't just go plump on the floor.
No.
There was always a little, maybe a holding back, or there was a little breath, or just a kind of a space.
I could have done that, but I don't quite remember, you know, why I might have looked like I was creating that moment of pause.
I mean, it gave a lightness to it, again, a certain kind of drama.
It needs to be light. It needs to be light, and it needs to be clearly directed.
And also when the point, you know, touches the floor, that's a very sort of exquisite moment, right? So you
that moment is when the back toe lifts off to move forward. Yeah, so that it doesn't lag behind.
Yeah.
So when the toe reaches the floor, the second toe is already in forward motion to touch the floor.
Now, did he give any instructions to Francisco Mancion?
He was a very monumental presence.
Yes, he was.
By my side or behind me. But I don't really recall what he did say to Frank. You know, I mean, he would demonstrate and show more than specifically speak to us about it, and so we would copy what we saw, and you know, he either accepted it or changed it or said a little more of this, a little more of that, but it was never really do this specifically for this reason. It was just a demonstration of movement to the music and the quality and the idea of what needed to happen.
Yeah.
We had freedom with him. I mean, he did trust us. And he did trust his dancers to give something of themselves and of their own imagination to what it was he was creating. And it became a collaboration, really.
I have a very, very clear memory of your doing this duet, even though it was a fairly long time ago. And as I remember it, you were in the duet, you were kind of in your own world, and you were very absorbed in yourself. And he was there, but he was there for you.
Thank goodness he was
there. But you weren't exactly there for him. You were doing your thing. You were doing your own, and he was there to sort of support you. And I've always wondered how how aware you were of your partner, of Monsieur, or whether you thought about it at all.
We didn't have much connection eye to eye. I mean, we weren't focusing on one another, but we were moving together and sometimes apart. As I was talking to Sarah about this, there are moments in the older version where they separate and then come together again. And I wasn't quite sure that I had actually done that, but when I did see it on film, I thought, oh, that's quite beautiful, as well as, staying connected. But I really was propelled by the music. So I was pulled in by the music, really. And that's probably what you saw. I was absorbed in the music and the movement and the walking, and I certainly felt his presence as a very protective force beside me or behind me, and it was a meditation, really. It was like a walking meditation or a dream-like feel.
Yes, I mean, that's why I wondered if you were aware of him, because sometimes it seemed that you were very deep into your meditation and very deep into your thoughts, your reverie.
But we were very conscious of our movements together or separately.
Yeah. One of the neat things about this coaching environment is that you can see details like you really can't see when you're in the audience. And I was so struck by the intricacy and delicacy with which you held hands with your partner. It was very complex, actually.
Intertwined.
Very
really.
intertwined, yes. You're not just, you're all wrapped around each other. And
it looks delicate, but at the end it's not so delicate.
Oh.
When we're moving away, I mean, there is some weight on his arm, so you can feel yourself moving around him and off the stage. There is that. You do have his arm to
hold you,
pull down.
To pull down. Tell me about listening to the music, which sounds like something that is easy to do. Sometimes in performance you don't feel that dancers are listening to the music as much as they might. They're thinking about what they have to do, which is natural enough. How were you able to listen to that music so deeply as you were dancing?
It was a habit of mine to take the music that I was working with and listening to it all the time, all day long. I'd go home and I'd listen to it over and over and over and over again, and I would hear more. The more I listened to it, I would hear more. I would be able to pull myself into the moment more easily. And it was just from listening to it so much, I would go home and I would really play the pieces of music that I would be working to, and I would hear them.
Would you sort of dance to it as you were listening, or mark it, or just?
No, I would just hear it.
You would just hear it.
I'd cook to it. I don't know. I would just try to get it inside of me so that it became second nature in a way. I mean, it would just be something that I was very comfortable with eventually.
Yeah, very intimate with. Yeah. Just a little detail. When you raise your arm and
in the notches.
In the notches, the notches moment.
Well,
to me, it was always startling a little bit because everything is so serene, but then all of a sudden.
Well, when you notice that moment with the leg, you notice that your leg is covered in tulle, which softens that motion just a little bit. And so I felt that the arm motion should have that softness, but because I didn't have the material over my arm, I tried to soften it by rounding the arm, in an upward motion with breath rather than keeping it stiff like a leg and you know, moving it rigidly upward. And so that was something that I did because it made sense to me.
Yeah.
He didn't change that.
Do you have any idea why Balanchine included that moment? Because it's the notches.
It's almost like a continuous heartbeat to me from beginning to end. You know, the walks.
Yeah.
And then I think Monsian also actually took up the pace with his walk when he walked by himself at certain moments.
Yes, yes.
And it felt like a...
To me, it felt like Balanchine was a pulse, a musical pulse.
A musical
though,
pulse.
That there's this pulse going on underneath, and it gives a certain depth or a certain texture, I think, to the music. But I always thought it was interesting that he had you, in a way, show it to us, show us that pulse, made it very vivid and alive.
I don't know how evident it was, you know, because I think I
Well,
did try.
it.
I did try to soften it when it came to the arms because but he never said, "Don't do it that way." Or, I mean, I somehow thought it would look more interesting or less harsh.
One little moment again about the walking, and I know that when the dancers first started out, you reminded Sarah to do croisé.
Not overcross,
Well,
but to really place one toe, to replace the toe that she was on with the other, really.
Yeah, because to me it looked more croisé than just, it was a hint of the croisé. And I just thought, well, I wonder if that was an extension of the walking on a tightrope thing. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be.
Yeah.
And I also feel that the more you exaggerate that moment, Sarah had a tendency, and I did too, to pull the toe away from that line in general, so that the overcrossed position would give you that little bit of room to be stepping exactly in front. Whereas if you start in that particular spot, then you're moving to the side. So that just that overcross position really brings it exactly to where you want it to be.
Were you ever aware of how silent the audience was? I was. I mean, as an audience member, I loved the silence because I used to get, you know, upset when there was coughing and moving. But
it was slightly breathless.
It was really breathless.
Until we went off. I felt that. You can feel that. As a performer, you can sense what's happening out front.
Were you breathing as you danced it?
Yes.
Yeah. We weren't.
Yes,
we weren't.
I was. To help me get through it.
Yeah. But the breathless, I mean, I guess you wanted to create that feeling
of lightness.
Of
lightness and airiness and that dreamlight, ephemeral quality.
Now we'll go on to the solo. And I know the solo has there's the earlier one and the later one. And just to get things straight, first Sarah did the earlier.
She did
the older one, the one she does today.
The one she does today. And then I tried to teach her what I remembered of the original. But it did have a very serpentine, sinuous quality. I mean, it really had movement, and the music really tells you that it does.
Yes.
And I think in transition, in time, it's become rather rigid and static. So it was nice to show her what it was because she can incorporate all of that information to what she's doing now without changing a step. So it's bringing the idea of what it was originally to her.
Yeah.
And allowing her to work with that.
When he was working on this with you, did you ever say, "Oh, this doesn't feel so great, maybe you should change it"? Or
never.
No. Or did he ever say, "Well, do you want me to change this here?"
No. No, and I never did really say this is not too comfortable. I wanted to see if I could give him what his idea was of the step and the moment. So I would typically, if it felt uncomfortable, I would say I'll work on it. So I would take it to a studio and then come back the next day and have resolved something, you know, and show him, and then it would work out that way.
I certainly noticed when you were coaching here that it's full of spiraling and movement and everything, but that you're never looking out front at the audience. And I don't remember that you did that either when you were dancing it.
No, I didn't. And again, I think it was propelled by the music. And it almost felt like an improvisation to me. Like although it certainly was structured in a way, there was enough freedom in the piece that made it feel slightly improvised, as if you were moving in a certain direction just at that moment. And the next time you performed it, it could have gone in another direction and it would have been acceptable as well. In the pas de deux, I always felt that we had already walked before we got on stage. So that the walking onto the stage was really a continuation of a walk that had already taken place. And Frank and I would actually walk in the wings and continue walking until we paused. And then it was almost like a pause in a walk, in a forest or somewhere in a glade. And then we'd look at, I'd look at the conductor and I would know when to begin, but then it was really just a continuation of that walk. And so it already, I think, might have had an atmosphere.
Oh, yes.
It was not a question of just walking, pausing, and starting a pas de deux. But I had that thought in mind, and Frank did as well.
As well, so you agreed on this. I mean,
we agreed on it together, and it wasn't really something that Balanchine mentioned, but in fact, the position on stage is not two people presenting themselves to an audience.
No.
It's
we're not there almost.
No, it's languid and thoughtful and contemplating and pensive. And when we go off in the pas de deux, it doesn't end at the wing, but it's as if you're continuing that walk, continue forever. And it should leave you with that feeling.
Did your performance evolve in any way? Did it change?
I think it became more comfortable. More comfortable in the sense that it became more liquid. I could play with it a bit more, and that it changed. And I was also telling Sarah that I think she was concerned about falling off point, but it was very typical to take those mistakes and turn them into a movement that would be quite just as beautiful as what you were given to do, and very accepted by Balanchine. He would either take that and use it or say, oh, that's fine, if that happens, do what you just did.
Is there anything that you want to say more about?
I appreciated the opportunity to be able to share the information, and as I'd mentioned to you, when we were in the company at City Center, we had Melissa Hayden, Diana Adams, Violette, Pat Wilde performing, and they were all extremely generous with what they had to give to the younger generation. And it happened spontaneously. And it was a wonderful, wonderful thing for us. And so I think any opportunity that we have to do the same for the generations that come after us, it's helpful.